Chapter 12. Love's Ever-Strong Heartbeat. I awoke, dehydrated in a dark room. My hands and legs were bound. The blindfold was removed. I saw a figure backed by light enter the room and approach me. He unbound me from the floor and then pulled me up by my restrained hands. It was Minot. He gave me water and food. "Jeshibian," he said. "How many days has it been?" I interrupted desperately. "2. She's still alive. I must go," I said, and I went to rush out of the room but was stopped by 2 guards. I put my face to my hands and felt Minot's hand on my shoulder. "Who is this you keep talking about?" "Ursia, she's alive," I said. "The Mayak they spoke about?" Minot said, looking at me sternly. I nodded. "The Mayak who tried to kill Seleth." Prejudice colored his phrasing. I then remembered the blood on the snow. "Minot, she carries my child," I cried, and I held my shaking and bound hands out to him, begging to be freed. Stunned, his eyes widened. He stroked the stubble on his chin. I could tell Minot struggled with the idea of where I had been, what I had done, and that now I loved a Mayak as my wife. It seemed somehow a blow to him. He could not overlook my anguish, however. "I will come back and stand trial, pay any debt, I swear," I pleaded with him. Minot's eyes still betrayed shock. His hand still stroked his chin as he began to pace the room. A holding cell? "Please let me go. Come with me if you must, but Jeshibian, Dalle sent an arrow through her. She can't be alive." "She is." "How do you know?" "Because she's strong," I wailed, and then I sank to the floor. Minot seemed paralyzed, confused. I could still feel her heart beating in mine. "But she can't hold on forever." Minot grabbed me by the shoulders. "You must forget her, brother. Your life is here, among Khoorhani." And I looked at Minot. I wondered where my real brother was. I smacked his hands away from me and yelled, "Is this how Paen has taught us? To be paralyzed in our prejudices? Oh, Minot, if you don't free me, and she dies, I will forever hate all Khoorhani. I will never have a place in my heart for you, Minot. If she dies, you will have killed any love I have ever had for you. I will pray to the highest form of the goddess and turn my heart black against you." I cried. The words. Daggers. And then I sank to my knees, driven mad by my love's ever-strong heartbeat, calling to me. And I planted my head to the ground before my brother. I kissed his feet, pleaded and begged, a broken dog. "Let me go, brother, I beg you, let me go to her." A drop fell to his feet, a tear from his own eye splashing on his sandal. He left the room. A few hours later, I was before my father, Khoorhani Ta. He looked grim, and he looked upon me like I was a foreigner. brothers were there too. They had no words for me. And only Darlian looked at me. I could see him peripherally. I could tell he wished to speak to me, but I would not give him my eyes. I could not forgive him, not now. I was resolved not to. Son, you have turned your back on us. Why? My father asked. His face seemed aged. How long had I been gone from them? Perhaps more time than I counted, perhaps years. It looked as if the war and the absence of Master Paen had resurrected Khoorlrhani Ta's former dark self. I had no words for them. I could not explain myself. You were given the Master's gift, his sword, his sight, and then abandoned us in our darkest hour. The gift of the Master is not a gift of invincibility, I said. Master's invincibility is a reflection of his love of Ashuta. It is a gift of vulnerability, I muttered. My father chuckled in a low, patronizing voice. Where is the sword, Jeshibian? I was dumbfounded. Surely it was strapped to Nanui when my brothers placed me on her back. I do not know, I responded. I welled up again, as we were wasting precious time. My father glared at me, sighed, and then said, Until I figure out what to do with you, you will remain in Tomok's dish. Clean him up and get him out of those rags. No, father, exile me. Please, release me. My father leaned forward, slammed his hand against his ivory armrest and bellowed, You are not free to do what you please. Haven't you learned that yet? The world is not your personal playground. You are a Khoorhani prince, not some stud to Mayak bitches. In that moment, I saw my father's ugliness, his blind hatred for the Mayak. He could not recognize me anymore, as I surely stood as a Mayak to him, and not his son. As I looked about the room, I saw the same mode of bigotry expressed on my brothers' faces. They were ashamed of me, a deserter, a turncoat. The palace seemed so utterly devoid of Paen's graces, the air heavy and wretched. My insides turned. I could think of nothing but Ursia. I felt her fading, slipping from me. I could not sleep. If I could not break free, I was determined to at least feel her, the tangible faintness, until it could no longer be felt. Later, I heard a noise from where I sat on a solitary mat. It sounded as though the bolt on the door was removed. The door was set ajar, and then it opened, slightly letting in the cool nighttime air. No one entered. I approached it to see no one outside, neither guard nor officer. My winter skins and boots, along with a water bag and food, was packed for me. Outside beneath the moonlight was Nanui. I went to her and noticed Mahabharata securely fastened to her side. My brothers hid the sword. I cut my bonds, mounted Nanui, and immediately set forth to the east. I looked back once and saw a familiar silhouette beneath the glow of torchlight. It was Minot watching me leave Archaea once again. I regretted the harsh words I had said to him. I pushed through the rest of the night, and soon the glow of dawn was upon me, and we did not stop for many hours. Nanui dug in and served me as no other mount could. We stopped for a short time for water, but we were soon back on the trail. We traveled for days, only resting at points, but not camping. The third day, Nanui could only trot as we headed into the foothills. With the altitude came snow and howling winds, but we did not stop. We pressed on, and all the way I could feel Ursia. I knew she was alive. Through the cold winds, the warm thread of her life, which was linked to me, called me to her. She was waiting for me. She was indeed strong. Nanui and I came to the cave. I dismounted and ran upward to where Ursia and I once made our home. It was dark, empty, and lifeless. We rode on, further up icy switchbacks, beyond to all the places Ursia and I once camped. She was nowhere to be found. I wrapped myself in my heavy animal skins that Minot returned to me, but they were not enough for ripping winds and sleet and snow. For however long I lived with Ursia in the mountains, I never acclimated completely to the low temperatures among these peaks, but I was determined to travel higher than I had ever been to find her. Nanui trudged along, and I could only hold on as we traveled up the face of the mountain. I knew Ursia was still alive. My conviction of this was deep as marrow. I would come for her. For hours, I saw nothing but hues of white and gray. All I felt was the stinging cold. My heart sank as the sun began its descent to conclude our fourth day of travel. Weak, I began to rethink this journey and began to crave warmth, honey, sunlight, and breezes. I was still the small boy from Archaea who only wished for the comfort of his mother. And yet I hoped somehow that boy would magically change and have strength. Still, I was unwilling to let go and so endured more pain. After some hours beneath the white moons, I came to a broad portion of mountainside, a white hill marked by sparse trees beneath the intense lunar radiance. the twin orbs full and large. I swayed on Nanui's back, hovered between consciousness and unconsciousness before I saw a dreamlike mirage. Two riders in the distance of silvery glow. Their heads were wrapped in rags that billowed in the harsh wind. The snow covered the hooves of their animals as they watched me from a distance. The two riders, like apparitions, then approached. I swooned. My eyes shifted out of focus, and then all of a sudden the riders were right before me. They were horrified by the sight of me. I coughed. "Ursia!" One, recognizing me as Khoorhrhani, laughed and drew his sword, ready to make an easy kill. I welcomed the idea of being beheaded as I could go no further. I did not draw Mahabharata, for I was too weak. I only focused on the name and pleaded, "Ursia! Ursia!" Before the warrior could strike, the other stopped him, blocking him at the elbow, and with a gesture of his hand asked me to repeat what I just said. He peered through the eyelets of his head wrap. "Ursia!" He stared at me as he said something to the other, and then he grabbed the reins of Nanui, pulled himself close to me, and withdrew his dagger. He said something to me, but I could not understand at first. I was too tired, the dialect too strong and harsh. He yelled at me and looked at me with eyes that did not trust me. "Ikeje badme, Khoorhani dog. I should kill you, Khoorhani dog." I understood Mayak now, my lover having taught me to listen with greater care. I expected death from these men, though I was not entirely concerned, infected with an illness that only looking upon Ursia's face again could cure. I shivered, then over Nanui's side vomited, coughed, and managed once more to utter the word, "Ursia." I felt a hand on my shoulder pulling me up. The warrior held a small water bag. He patted my shoulder and beckoned me to drink. The fluid was hot, harsh, and biting, but made me warm. I coughed from it, and the two warriors laughed. He gestured and said in my language, "Drink, boy. Bring back Khoorhani dog's soul." I did, and the warrior squeezed the bag to force more of the mixture into me. Much of it spilled against my face, thawing my cheeks. I felt calmer. They led me up the mountain, randomly patting my shoulder to keep me awake. "No sleep. No die yet. We see her." An eternity passed as we rode beneath the moons, up the steady slope until we finally came to a circle of large skin tents, obscured by large ice-covered rocks. Behind them was a large frozen lake, reflecting the pale glow of the moons. My body trembled with the realization that I was entering a Mayak camp. But in the pit of my stomach, I felt Ursia. I knew she was there. The warriors were greeted by others, and a commotion was made about my presence. Dogs, their large black wolves, growled at me, but were beaten back by their masters at the behest of the warriors who guided me. There was some violence, but it did not escalate beyond shouting and shoving. A young warrior, angered at the sight of me, spat on me. But the two I was with, preventing him from doing anything more, they sent him away, telling him to go to his wife. I was escorted to a tent. The lead warrior then pointed. I dismounted with some difficulty and was brought inside. Nanui sorted with exhaustion. They took her, telling me they would give her food and water. The room was warm, a golden glow inside, and in the center of it was a large bed of animal skins by a generous fire. There she was, my Ursia. From across the dirt floor, a short and round woman came to me. She spoke to the warrior, glancing to him, then back to me. Her eyes were large and gray. Her hair was straight, pulled back tightly and tied into a bun. She listened to the warrior telling of me, gasped, and then said, "Jeshibian?" I nodded. A tear then escaped her eyes. She abruptly took my hand and brought me to Ursia, who slept. I fell to Ursia's side, put my face to hers. I merely looked at her and felt restored. I touched her face, and she woke up. Our eyes on each other, finally we smiled. I kissed her. She then coughed and winced in pain. I moved her covers down along her right shoulder. Her wound did not look good. She coughed more violently, and then the woman came to us and tended to Ursia. She gestured Ursia to move to one side. She then worked to clean where the arrow entered from her back through the collarbone. I put my hand on Ursia's belly. The woman looked at me with an expression that confirmed my fears. Ursia had miscarried. I was adrift in waves of emotion. Was I to have nothing to hold to? Ursia turned on her back and took my hand. The realization then set into me that Ursia was really dying. I remembered this moment with Suan, my mother, the moment of our saying goodbye. The old woman looked at me and Ursia, then softly wept. I did not run from it. I would accept it. I had learned now that death is a part of life. The people you love are subject to death at any time. I knew that hopes and ideas all die, and that in love was the only dignified response. Why not play in love? The master's words rang in my mind and in my heart. By those words I knew I would heal, and I did not regret loving Ursia, nor begrudge God for taking her now. I only wanted to look into her eyes and feel the love, being grateful for our final moment. To love and regard her and her family as she went. We did not stop looking at each other, she whispered. I wanted to give you this baby, Jeshibian, she said. I wanted to raise it with you, I said. I waited for as long as I could for you. I came as fast as I could. I trembled. It was not written in the stars for us, though, she said, and then laughed. But you will love again, she said softly. She began to cough more and then managed to say, I love you. I lay beside her and stroked her hair. I love you, I whispered and grinned and looked deeply into her. I reached into one of my bags and produced a single Khoorhani sovereign and showed it to her. The ransom, I joked, placing it in her hand. She laughed, her smile wry, her eyes shining as she curled her fingers softly around the coin. "Okay, hostage. You behave well. I let you go now," she said softly, and she waved her hand to set me free. Our eyes lingered for some time throughout the night before she went to sleep again, still holding my hand. She gripped my hand for as long as she could, and then dawn took her away from us all. Again, I died inside, but I was so happy to have loved her. What a grace you are, Master, I thought, knowing that, as I stood, it was somehow him standing in my heart to show me, to teach me, to slowly fix my vision to notice the wonder of surrender, the enormity of value, and the surrender to this love always given. This love, recognizable despite the tragic passing of dreams, fantasies, lovers, and life itself. I cried into my hands, the sense of loss so great, so overwhelming, but somehow the gratitude for her in life also so alive and honoring and accepting her death. Loving her made the pain only natural, almost beautiful, not offensive unto eclipsing the joy of love itself. This is what my master taught me. This was what being a true warrior was about. The old woman took me into her arms. Others came in, those who clearly loved Ursia and who grieved for her death. An older man came to me, an old warrior. He spoke my language. Khoorlrhani centurion. I am her uncle, Thessaron. He then pointed to the woman, and she is her mother, Adla. I remembered that name. Thessaron, and he seemed to recognize me. It was years ago we met, when I was not yet old enough to ride my own Mera. He was Unat's ambassador, the peacemaker, who transported gifts to my father. His face now lined with age, though he was still a mountain of a man, a fighter, no doubt. I rose and went to him. I composed myself, wiping away tears. Adla, Thessaron, I grieve for you, I said in his tongue. Thessaron nodded. Adla then spoke in a different dialect, and Thessaron translated. We both know that you loved Ursia. We grieve for you. She called your name in the nights. I fought back the tears, but was overwhelmed. If I had fought for Adla, Ursia would have been my child. She would not have run away, Thessaron said. If she hadn't run, I would never have known how beautiful and dignified the Mayak people are, I said. And Thessaron translated. I held up 2 fingers joined together, the gesture Ursia made to signify the great one tribe. Adla cried as she embraced me. Just then a warrior who guided me to the camps threw open the flap of the tent opening. He yelled at Thessaron, who told me, He says you have to leave. There are others who know you are here now, others who wish to kill you or hold you for ransom. You must go. They will put you on a pole. Now go. I was rushed out of the tent, but not before a last look at Ursia. My heart was torn in two, but I still had a will to survive. Soon I was on Nanui and riding hard to the south as instructed by the guiding Mayak warrior. Go for 2 days, hide in the caves. Perhaps he referred to the caves Ursia and I once lived in, or to another more obscure location, but I did not know. I just rode. The sound of pursuing Meras trailing me. My head throbbed, my body still weak from the previous night's journey. I had not eaten for days. Nanui pressed on ferociously for at least an hour. I began to fade. The sound of hooves behind me, yips and yipes of an enthusiastic death squad. I wondered how bad death by impaling would be, but I now had no strength to worry, none whatsoever. The white snow on the ground seemed to envelop me, to blot me out as it took me into its eternal maw. I felt myself float down a cliff, poor Nanui falling too, her sounds blending with mine. Then the snow stung against my skin, and I felt branches snagging and tearing clothes. The chaotic melange lasted for some time before my body hit something hard. I felt nothing then, but I heard water. A brook running, footsteps in the snow approaching. I thought I rose, was on my feet, the sound of steel against steel, the sound of bodies hitting the ground, dreams of the form of the asp, of the ape, of the tiger. And then it was quiet, so quiet, followed by a sharp, deep, cold pain. Was I dead? Was this the end of my story? Then I heard rustling and grunting, and I felt a sensation of being lifted like a sack of grain on someone's strong shoulders, or perhaps across the rump of a mera. Through all of the jostling, I felt a red-hot stinging thread of pain. I had hoped I would die before they took me back to that pole to be displayed as a trophy of hate, but I understood. I would have killed my own brother to save my Ursia. I would have run him through to protect what I loved. I knew I did all of that, of what I stood accused, and therefore payment was due. I understood. The vicious circle of it. It was my time to die. The master was right about me. I was no longer an innocent boy chasing butterflies, but a man chasing dreams and demanding Ashuta's light shine on my terms. I too, like all of us, invested more into what appeared and less into the deeper truth. What a game. What a tricky game. I chased my desires rather than hold to him. This would be my fate, I thought. Then I heard more rustling, the snapping of twigs, the crunching of more footsteps, and then digging. Perhaps I was already dead and would be buried. I thought, do Mayak bury their dead? I could not remember if they did. Then time was a long, thin black line, and then I felt cold, wet, and then warm and dry, and I smelled dirt. I then felt a great deal of pain in the center of my chest, and I could smell smoke. I heard a throat clearing and the tinkering of things, and then sleep released me after an awful and helpless eternity. And my eyes focused and took in a small thatched interior, and over my face I saw a pair of eyes staring back at me. I smelled tea, and then tasted it. The face above winked at me. I grinned, even as I winced in pain. Before me was Master Paen. Chapter 13. The Master's Discovery. We were silent for days as I could not talk. I traced a finger along my chest and felt a grisly scar. A deep cut across it that traveled upward along my neck and to my earlobe. The master had stitched me up. He noticed the curious wanderings of my index finger against my wound, and he said, "Be careful, you. We don't want to reopen that." "What? How?" I gurgled, cut short by the pain. "And try not to talk. I will tell you everything. But first, eat this." And he fed me a kind of soup, spooned it into my mouth. "It's a good thing I happened upon you when I did. You were fighting fiercely for your life. You are tougher than you give yourself credit for, Jeshibian. Even though you took quite a fall, you managed to best 2 of the 5 men who are on you." I had no memory of it whatsoever. The master's eyes lit as he elaborated on the story. "I came upon you after one of your 5 pursuers cut you nearly in half. He was about to finish you. I couldn't allow for that, so here we are." "Nanui?" I whispered. "Oh, she's fine. Only a chipped horn, though I don't think she'll be inclined to a joyride with you anytime soon. Rest. Sleep," he instructed. And I slept indeed, for an immeasurable amount of time, all the while conscious of the pain in my chest and neck, in my gut, and in my heart. Sadness hovered above me as I dreamt of Ursia, only to awaken to the reality that she was gone. Paen fed me more, and one morning I awoke with regained strength only to fall back to sleep. The cold seemed to have broken somewhat when I next woke. I saw Paen seated, legs folded before the entrance of our low-ceilinged shelter, which led in a shaft of light onto the dirt floor. Master Paen was quiet. His attention gathered him as his brown eyes looked into the distances I imagined were before him. I watched him for some time as he scanned intently, and then his voice cut through the silence. "This has been the worst snowstorm this region has seen in years." I cleared my throat, but could not speak yet without feeling a sharp pain. "Welcome to the Highlands, Jeshoia. I suppose before you left home you did not realize you were quite underdressed. I suppose love does that, motivates a man beyond reason, beyond sanity." I drifted back to sleep. The next time I woke, I could finally sit up, finally speak. We ate together in the quiet, however within the warmth of our tiny shelter as the winds raged outside. "Why so glum? You survived quite an ordeal," the master then asked, trying to cheer me up. I told him my story, of how I searched for him in the foothills below, of meeting Ursia. I told him about our time together, and how much I loved her, and why, and I told him of the events that led to her death. And at that conclusion I found it hard to speak the words to describe her leaving me. The master placed his hand gently on my neck, then my face, and he said with such warmth and compassion, "Oh, my. What a story. Oh, Jeshibian, I am so sorry for your loss. Losing a lover is so difficult. It will be difficult for some time, but you will heal and you will see there is so much left for you to live for. You are alive and you have so much growth to look forward to." I nodded and managed to smile as I looked into those eyes of his. I remembered his lesson about my mother, and in my heart I agreed. I did not avoid the pain of life dealt to me this time. I was happy that I could manage that, even though I was disappointed. I did not want to be a mere soldier, but the warrior Paen was, seeing, hearing, unafraid to love, tireless and afraid to feel, and most of all, compassionate, strong in the ways of the heart. It will be at least 2 weeks, I say, before this damned snow will clear. Enough that I feel it's safe to travel. The rocks are too icy for old Khoorhani. I knew his concern was for me. I was healing, but the master did not want me to suffer the journey down from the mountains. So you traveled deep into the highlands to find your love. What an amazing story, my friend. Master, I said, I could not live without her. I did not think twice. And in my heart I was sad, but I was also so happy that I knew love was that, and would have surely died for her. Knowing that about myself made me happy. And you traveled against odds that would normally keep a boy at home at the skirts of his mother. I wonder what that says about bravery. What inspires it, I recalled my self-doubt as a boy. It seemed clear to me that the love of another is what made men brave and was not a self-manufactured quality. Now you get it, Paen said. And so I began to wonder, did Ashuta play this all out for my sake? Was she leading me about the chapters of my life, dangling hopes and desires from a string, so that I could learn these truths? I asked the master this as I cleaned out our shelter after serving him a meal. Life all happens to purify, to move attention toward her, Jeshibian. There is not a soul she does not play, no man, woman, child, or creature in the wild. Master, I said, when I left I was really looking for you, but I got distracted. There you go again. You're always looking for me, Jeshibian. You mustn't feel guilty for following your attractions, my friend. The problem stems from the possessive assignments you make. My journey, my mother, my lover, my bravery, my loss, my gain. Who has these things? You still don't understand. By not asking who got distracted and by not becoming obsessed with answering that satisfactorily enough to really connect with it, you contract as a self who is objectified in the manner of the mythic character, Jandi. You then struggle with Mandi, the others, who oppose or attract a you to your journey, your mother, your lover. You must see how this reinforces your sense of being separate from me. There is only one that stands as all that attracts you. That one is me. I was quiet, happy with this good news, his teaching, that I had again forgotten so easily. You were looking for me when you wanted to be a centurion and ride in the army. You were looking for me when you happened upon your next distraction, your new love. You wanted to be a lover, a father, right? Yes, nothing wrong with that. And that may happen again later, he said, stretching his hand out. But, he prompted me. But I was not truly satisfied. And was that the fault of the war, of Ursia? No. But as beautiful and loving as Ursia was, as wonderful as your life together may have been, your heart yearned to know something else, something at a greater depth, that you could not locate if you lived out your life here in the mountains, away from your worries and your private kingdom, I struggled with this because I did not want to reduce my experience with Ursia in any way. But at the core I knew that As events unfolded, and though in a sort of bliss with her, I became troubled, doubtful. Is it because no matter what happens, it cannot deeply satisfy? I asked. Your thirst, your true self, comes to you in dreams to rattle your cage and destroy everything standing between it and you until it and you are reconciled. So it seems to you that there is always some unsettled business, all the time and everywhere, somewhere and somehow. And why does it seem this way? Paen asked me. All attainment is for naught. It's based on illusion, Master. Okay, what is the illusion? He challenged. Me? I finally said, and so all my loves cannot satisfy to the core because I don't know myself to the core. What do you mean? How will you know yourself to the core? Who will know it? Who is it? He leaned toward me, his eyes bulging comically to give me the answer. No one can know this one. I speak only of an idea, Master. There's only devotion to you, I said. Well, finally you can manage to say these words, but it sounds only like the right words. Though I recommend devotion, who will do this devotion? You cannot know this deeper one than I know you to be by doing anything, because you cannot locate the person that you vaguely refer to. That's my point, Jeshibian. Investigate the idea that you speak of. You must simply be me, so that I am recognized to actually be you and am thus understood completely. That is the devotion that is required, the devotion of keeping your hands open. I am that open-handedness. And indeed, I did not recall into thoughts wandering and shifting internally. Instead, I quietly was him. My beloved master as is, gazing at the thawing countryside by his side. Later, I cut up meat that I trapped, a rabbit, and prepared it for him. My head bent beneath the low ceiling as the master began to talk again. So much is changing. What do you mean? I asked. I am her instrument, but it seems the pattern is really about to change. I don't know how yet. I then became afraid as I looked at Paen, who flashed his wordless glance at me to stop what I was doing. I let it go. I obeyed. He then said, "Don't concern yourself with it. You just stick with me and do as I say." You remember that tree analogy? Yeah, I almost had to bury you, remember?
Yes, Master.
I stared blankly at him and then nodded.
So what is on the menu?
He clapped his hands and beckoned me to continue with my cooking. I'm starved. Master, I asked, why did you leave Archaea? He sighed, then said, No one sees me, Jeshibian. I am here, I am true. I am the one everyone wants to appear, the one unfettered, the master with diamond eyes, but no one wants me. They want me to be their friend, their ally, their political advisor, their personal slave, but no one wants me, God. I wander the lands of a world of souls that do not see me. It is very difficult to live among children who do not wish to grow, who only want more and give less. So, I left to enjoy the great one land as I see it naturally. The land not cut up by lines of ego conquest. I knelt before Paen, bowed and said, I will do my best, Master. I do not wish you to go. His eyes fell on mine and he smiled as he said, I know. That is why we are here. The weeks passed on, and soon there were only small patches of snow against the grassy mountainside. The master whistled loudly, and our maras, Kwanan and Nanui, came at a trot. Happily, we descended the mountain, and in 4 days, we arrived at Arkaya. Before we were seen, the master said this. "One thing." "Yes?" "Your brothers. Whatever wrong they have done you, you must forgive them for all of it." I looked at him and met a serious gaze. I sucked in a breath and agreed. "Yes, master."